First of all, welcome everyone. This is the first session of our COVID-19 Widowed Resource Program. I'm Michelle Neff Hernandez, the CEO of Soaring Spirits, and we're here today to talk about the impact of trauma and as it relates specifically PTSD to the COVID-19 widowed experience. I want to state, first of all, that I'll be speaking to you with my expertise from working with thousands of widowed people, not from a personal experience of a COVID-19 death. So I say that because in the widowed community that Soaring Spirits has created, we work very hard to make sure that people have the opportunity to connect with someone else who has a similar experience. And so we do share the experience of being widowed. But we are creating this COVID-19 resource program specifically to address the needs of COVID-19 widowed people. So I want to talk a little bit about what trauma is, because so often, think about it if you would for a minute with a traumatic injury to your body. So, if you broke your leg or you had a cut, right, you can see where the injury is. It's clear. And what's also clear is how it's healing. If it's an outside injury, you begin to see your skin knitting together. You see a scab coming together. You can even tell if it's not healing well because it becomes red around the edges. You may start thinking to yourself, oh, I need to get this looked at again. So when you think of trauma from the experience of an emotional trauma, I love one of the resources you'll get by email, all of you, anyone, even someone watching, this video, is a document that Soaring Spirits has that's called What is Trauma? And I love this, so I'm going to read it exactly as it says it. Trauma is a metaphor for life events that tear at the psychological skin that protects us, leaving us emotionally wounded. And so when we think about the types of trauma that are associated with the death of our spouse or partner, there's one level of that, right? That includes the isolation, that includes missing them, that includes all of the life changes that happen when a shared life is suddenly taken by just one person. But when you add the COVID-19 experience, what we're also talking about is the daily traumas that come with the use of that word, right, over and over again to describe all kinds of things. And it could be everything from, a product at a store to an experience in a restaurant to something, as simple as that to the more complicated, vaccination efforts and all of the things that are constantly described by the COVID-19 word or the word pandemic. And so for our COVID-19 widowed people, the use of that word so loosely, I will say, how about that? It can cause repeated trauma. So imagine if that cut on your arm or on your leg were, just a single gash, then add traumas to it. You're cutting again, you're adding additional, maybe you got a bruise, now you've got, an open wound on your shoulder. It's a constant bruising of that protective skin that is supposed to protect our heart, our mind, and our body. So this is another key element of the trauma experience, and that's that it's not felt only in your heart or your soul. So when you think about grief, most people imagine that they're going to have a grief experience that's all emotional, and they forget that we're so tied to our physical, emotional, mental selves are one, that Tara laying on her heating pad could very well have a back injury or whatever kind of injury she's had relating to her grief experience. That our grief experience comes out in our bodies. So when we're unable to sleep, we're unable to concentrate, we're unable to find the motivation to get out of bed. Sometimes we're associating that only with emotional pain, but sometimes there's also an element of physical pain. In fact, often. So I just want to remind you as you're making your way through this experience that when you have what feel like unrelated physical experiences, physical problems. I just met with a person who threw her back out. And she said to me, she had a plan to do something. She wrote in to say she wasn't going to be able to do the thing because her back was out. And I said, I just want to tell you that that's very common for people who are having a grief experience. And she said, it is? I said, it is. Muscle pain, muscle strains, all kinds of physical things that you think this has nothing to do with my grief really could have everything to do with your grief. And so what's the cause? The cause is the trauma that you've experienced, and not only just an individual trauma, right? Not just the experience of your person's death, but the ongoing trauma associated with living through the pandemic with whatever physical ailments. I know, I don't know about our new group, but for the group that we ran last time, I would say 50% of the people who were experienced a COVID death also had COVID themselves. And so there is the experience of whatever physical elements you personally had. There is the experience of you having survived and your person having died. There's all of these additional traumas that when you are living the widowed experience aren't always associated with what you are making your way through. So I want to just recognize that for you. If you are struggling physically, emotionally, mentally, those are all expected outcomes to living through a trauma. And here's the thing about PTSD. So PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder. So I want you to think back to when the first time you might have ever heard that phrase. Many times it's associated with someone who has had an experience of being a veteran of a war or some kind of accident, a trauma that they lived through physically that was significant and often caused physical harm to their bodies. And so PTSD was something that people talked about in relationship to military service specifically, as well as other significant trauma experiences. And we began to kind of think of it in that way as only associated with something that people, like no one else kind of could understand. Well, doesn't that apply so well to you all? Doesn't that apply to this experience so uniquely? Is that you have experienced a trauma. So what the stress of that trauma, right, is ongoing. So instead of it just being okay, I've experienced this and it was horrible, and now I've lived through it and I'm moving forward and I'm going to continue healing in a linear fashion, what post-traumatic stress does is pulls you back into the trauma. So each time you experience something that reminds you of what you've experienced, imagine taking a step back into the trauma. Like that's kind of what happens, is that you're drawn backwards. And so initially, that can be not only disorienting, but disheartening. Like, am I ever going to be able to make it out? It feels like that 2 steps forward, 1 step back dance, except for in reverse, where I'm 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Where do I ever end up? And so here's the thing I want you to be aware of, is that when you can connect with the trauma that you've experienced, and by that I mean acknowledging it, recognizing it as a trauma, recognizing the ongoing traumatic experiences you're having as you're trying to make your way through, that it gives you the understanding, which is critical to your healing, which is, okay, right, that's pulling me back into my trauma. When we can identify that we're being pulled backwards, then it doesn't feel as disheartening. It is an actual real experience that you're having. And so you're not going crazy. There's nothing wrong with you that you haven't healed yet. I'm going to say that again. There is nothing wrong with you. If you're feeling like, gosh, how long is this going to take? Like, how long am I going to feel sad? How long am I going to feel broken? How long am I going to feel like I can't remember my name or my neighbor's name or my kid's name or my dog's name? Like, how long am I not going to be able to function at the level that I was used to before? And here's the thing, I don't know the answer to that. But what I do know is that the only thing that we can give ourselves is time. And that when we pressure ourselves to do more than we're able to do, it doesn't equal increased performance, right? Like in other times in your life, maybe you could say like, okay, I'm going to buckle down and I'm going to make my way through this. And it doesn't matter that my body's telling me not to. And it doesn't matter that I feel overwhelmed. And it doesn't matter that I feel like I can't move forward at all. I'm going to make myself. I'm here to tell you that this is not something that you will benefit from. You won't benefit from forcing yourself through this. But here's what you will benefit from: a couple of things. One, being able to recognize that this is a trauma, recognizing that what you've lived through is traumatic, because what that gives you is the freedom to say, give yourself a break. Oh, that's right. I am living through a trauma. I deserve a break. Instead of an increased level of activity, it might be called for a decreased level of activity. And what happens when we don't hear that is often injury, physical injury that ends up putting us laid out I mean, I don't know if that's what's happening for you right now, Tara. I'm not suggesting that necessarily, but I will say that when you have an issue, a physical experience of an injury, and it's in the aftermath of a grief experience, a lot of times it's tied to, I kept going when my body told me I couldn't go anymore. Because our bodies are trained to say to us, hey, slow down. Like, I'm not ready for that yet. So what we do in our traumatic experience is going to influence how we heal. And that doesn't mean that you couldn't heal if you pushed yourself uphill all day long over and over. It just means it's going to take a much longer time. And it's probably going to be more traumatic because you're not hearing the cues that your body's giving you. So what are some of those kind of cues? What does that even mean? And when we do our wrap up, we're going to be sending out a document that lists the common trauma reactions in adults. So how do I know if I'm experiencing trauma? What kind of symptoms and signs should I look for? I'm going to read these out loud because I want you in your brain right now to be like going check, check, check. Let's hear if any of these sound resonate with you. So behavioral changes that would suggest that you've lived through a trauma. Easily startled, jumpy, on edge, over alert to danger, detached or withdrawn, fearful or nervous, anger outbursts, irritability, sleep disturbances, avoiding thinking about the trauma, avoiding people, places, activities, or feelings, conversations associated with traumatic events also avoided, or obsessively thinking about same, right? All of the ones that I've just listed. So it could be one or the other. You could either be obsessed with it or you could be completely uninterested and not wanting to be a part of it. Mental and emotional reactions that could suggest trauma: difficulty experiencing emotion, mentally shut down, emotionally shut down, guilty or shameful, difficulty concentrating, sad or angry, flashbacks of the experience of a particular part of the experience, nightmares, disturbing memories or images. Physical common trauma reactions: shallow breathing, muscle tension, headaches, nausea, hot or cold sweats, vomiting or diarrhea, trembling or fatigue. And then lastly, the social trauma reactions: wanting to isolate from others, avoiding social interactions, feeling not understood by others, strained relationships. Also could be strengthened relationships. Oftentimes those are new relationships with people who have an understanding of what you're going through, or anxiety being with others. So while that is a long and maybe ugly list, I want to read them out loud because I feel like validating the kinds of experiences that you're having is the first step towards being able to recognize what trauma is and how trauma might be affecting you today. Once we can identify what the trauma is, and remember, this is an ongoing experience. So for trauma, you have not only not only the experience in itself, the first experience, which is the death of your person, but the ongoing influences that have happened since. And so it could be more than one trauma, often is more than one trauma. And what PTSD does is pulls you back into those feelings of trauma, making you almost feel like you're living it again. And so what matters is being able to recognize when you're feeling pulled back and then be able to develop the self-care techniques that can help you move through that experience. Notice that I didn't say move out of. We're going to move through it because it's going to continue to evolve as you make your way through the grief experience. So trauma isn't something that is over in just a moment. It's something that is often revisited. Trauma is a word, I mean, it's almost a buzzword now. People talk a lot about all the different types of trauma, but there's a reason for that. That's because when we can recognize that we've experienced a trauma, we can begin to address that trauma. Unless we call it a trauma and recognize it for the influential experience that it is, right? All of these different common reactions that I just read to you are typical of what happens for people. I'd be surprised if many of you don't have multiple of these, because they are all signs that you have lived through something difficult and that you are in the process of recovering from that. So I want to make that super clear so that you remember to give yourself so much grace around the recovery time. Let go, if you can, of an expectation of how long it's going to last. How long will you not be yourself? Not because you won't have the ability to return to a person you recognize. Let me say that again. I'm not asking you to let go of the expectation of how long this is going to take, because I don't expect you to recover. I do. It is possible to make your way through this. It is possible not only to make your way through this, but to make your way through it to a place where you feel like you want to live your life again. The thing I can't answer for anyone is how long will that take? And when we set ourselves up with an expectation of how long it will take, more than often than not, we're disappointed and we feel pressured. And then that ends up just stretching out the experience longer. So being able instead to free yourself from an expectation of time and instead focus yourself on self-care, addressing the ways that you can take care of yourself when items like these things come up, is really, really important. We will be doing one of these workshops completely about self-care to help you be able to address this. We'll also be sending out some resources for self-care as we go forward. So you'll see that. So I'm not going to put these out there without giving you some suggestions for how to take care of yourself. But I just want to make it, I wanted to bring it to the front of your mind that you have experienced a trauma and likely are experiencing ongoing trauma. And if you were to say to someone you love, if someone were to say to you, I've been traumatized every day for 18 months, what would you say to them? You would want to offer them kindness and care and just feel for them. Like, I feel for you, that must be so hard. If it was someone you love, that would be your experience. So what I want to remind you of is to try to put yourself in that place and offer yourself the same love and kindness and compassion that you would offer to someone who told you that they have been traumatized for fill in the blank amount of time. So whatever the amount of time it is since you've been widowed, since you've lived this experience, and probably you might have to tack on more time if you were caring for your loved one, depending on how long that experience was for you. That's the amount of time that you have been living with trauma. And if someone else were to say that to you, offer yourself the kind of compassion you would for them in that moment. So this is just, instead of a deep dive into PTSD, it is a reminder that you have experienced a trauma, that really the layman's definition of PTSD is as re-experiencing that trauma based on something that has reminded you of it. And that when we can recognize that and recognize that we are pulled back into the trauma, we have the best possible opportunity for caring for ourselves and offering ourselves the grace that we will need to make our way through. So please look for those resources that describe those trauma responses, as well as what trauma is to overall, and then some self-care tips as well. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today, and I look forward to sharing future resources. Thanks so much.